The Psi-Ops Chronicles. Part 1. The Cerebral Phantom. It began with whispers in the night, strange murmurs that sent chills down the spines of the villagers. Rumors spread of a ghostly figure roaming the streets, its icy tendrils plucking brains right from people's skulls. At first, the tales seemed too fantastical to be true. But then the disappearances started. Old Walter from the butcher shop went missing one night, only to reappear the next day, his eyes glazed over, a slack-jawed grin plastered across his face. He shambled around town like one of the undead, mindlessly following any command issued by the invisible force that now controlled him. More victims soon followed, the schoolteacher, the sheriff, even little Timmy who delivered newspapers. The village fell into a state of sheer panic as the brain phantom, as the fiend came to be called, assembled its own personal army of mindless thralls. That's when he arrived. No one knew his true name or origin, but the young vigilante who strode into town that fateful day would soon etch his way into local law. With a confident smirk and a shock of unruly crimson hair, he cut quite the dashing figure in his form-fitting crimson bodysuit. "Fear not, citizens," he bellowed in an overdramatic baritone. "For I, the Crimson Cavalier, shall rid your humble village of this foul brain-nabbing spectre." The newly christened Crimson Cavalier certainly had a zany flair, but he backed up his bravado with some seriously impressive abilities. With a mere concentrated thought, he could levitate objects or even himself, allowing him to gracefully soar over the village rooftops. His skills in hand-to-hand combat weren't too shabby either, as more than one of the brain phantom's enslaved minions would soon learn the hard way. On his first night patrol, the Cavalier caught sight of the ghastly villain in action. A putrid green mist trailed behind the wraith-like creature as it slithered ethereally towards Mrs. McGillicuddy, the 90-year-old village knitting circle president. Its spectral tendrils extended forth, aiming to bore straight through the old woman's skull. "Not on my watch, you ectoplasmic angler fish," the hero shouted. He flung out his palm, unleashing a concentrated telekinetic pulse that disrupted the phantom's ghastly mist. It howled in agony, dispersing into 1,000 ghostly motes that rapidly scattered. Mrs. McGillicuddy was saved, but alas, the brain phantom's reign of terror was only just beginning. Over the next few weeks, the two adversaries clashed again and again in scenes straight out of a horror comedy flick. One night, the phantom manifested as a grotesque brain zombie from an old 1950s B-movie, its exposed grey matter pulsing grotesquely as it chased the Crimson Cavalier through the village square. Our hero displayed some fancy footwork avoiding the abomination's snapping jaws until, with a well-timed sweep of his cape, he clotheslined the monstrosity and reduced its slimy form to so much ectoplasmic goop. Another harrowing encounter saw the hero trapped in the village crypt, the phantom's sinister cackle echoing through the dank catacombs. Skeletal hands erupted from the ground, grabbing at the cavalier's limbs as the ghostly fiend's misty tendrils snaked between the cobwebbed coffins. Thinking quickly, the hero channeled his powers to shatter the restraining bones, then blasted his way out through the crumbling crypt entrance with a deafening sonic boom, the phantom hot on his ethereal trail. The final fateful showdown came on All Hallows' Eve, because of course it did. That night, the brain phantom amassed its full army of mind-controlled zombies in the village pumpkin patch. Scores of zombified citizens dressed as vampires, witches, and even a stray xenomorph lumbered in a grotesque parody of a Halloween party. Standing amidst the horde was their vile master, newly reconstituted in its most terrifying form yet, a towering spectre with a massive gaping maw filled with row upon row of sharpened fangs. As the blood-curdling shrieks of the enslaved trick-or-treaters filled the air, the Crimson Cavalier burst onto the scene with a dramatic flair. "Halt, you cranial pillager," he cried, unleashing a devastating psychokinetic blast. It staggered the ghostly titan, but was nowhere near enough to banish the creature. Not with the psionic life force of all its enslaved victims fueling its nefarious powers. An epic battle ensued, the very laws of physics themselves bending and warping beneath the psychic maelstrom. Rusty farm equipment whirled through the air like screeching metal dervishes. Pumpkin guts and gore splattered the ground as zombies were blown asunder. For every thrall the Cavalier managed to free from the Phantom's control, 3 more lurched forward to take its place. At one point, the hero found himself trapped in the ghastly villain's very mind, a hellish cerebral realm of twisting and fractal nightmare imagery. But through sheer force of will, and a cheeky cinematic one-liner about the villain having a Gaul complex, the Crimson Cavalier fought his way free. But it was only by uncovering the Brain Phantom's shocking secret that he was finally able to defeat the vile ectoplasmic horror once and for all. The creature was but a psionic tulpa, born from the combined subconscious fears and nightmares of the villagers themselves. Concentrating every iota of his willpower and mental discipline, the Crimson Cavalier bombarded the psychic entity with waves of pure, focused courage and hope. The Phantom wailed in existential agony until, like a night terror dissipating at the first crack of dawn, it burst apart into a million glittering motes of light. As the spectral mist faded, the zombies' empty expressions turned to ones of bewilderment. They were free at last, completely restored to their original selves with no memory of their horrific ordeal. A great cheer rose up from the liberated villagers, a cheer for their newly minted hero, the Crimson Cavalier. The dashing and eccentric young man relished in the adulation, though he knew the celebrations must be short-lived. For in vanquishing the Brain Phantom, he had unearthed a deeper, darker truth. A revelation that hinted at an even greater evil lurking in the shadows, waiting to unleash fresh nightmares upon the world. And the Crimson Cavalier would need to be ready.